the work that you're doing here, like a lot of people, when they hear Money Fit MD, they think it's all about money. We spent probably about 3 minutes talking about money specifically. The rest of it was all this other stuff that is critical to talk about when we're talking about this important thing of money.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode with Dr. Latifat on the Money Fit MD show. I am so excited to be here with you guys for so many reasons because number one, I get to hang out with you guys. When I don't hang out with you, I miss you. So I think we just need to like buy 100-acre land or a whole city and just move there and live happily ever after. So if you agree, make sure you go leave a review on the podcast so you can let me know where we should buy this land. No, I'm not moving to New York and I'll be cold. Sorry. All right, y'all. Yeah, I'm whack and it's all good. I am also super duper excited about the conversation that we're going to have today because I think it's going to be so helpful to so many of you guys, but also because this is someone that I've been looking forward to having on the podcast for a while, and we finally are making it happen. So, without any further delays, I want you guys to say welcome to Dr. Kristi Angevine. Welcome to the Money Fit MD show.
It is so fun to be here. I wish your listeners could see you. And when you are saying hello and your head is moving, you got this big smile on your face, and it's like a little bit of, it's almost like there's music playing, you're dancing. I think they can hear that in your voice, but seeing it was really delightful because I didn't really know that that's what you were looking like when I was listening to you on your podcast. So it's so fun, y'all. She's as vibrant, it like in the flesh as her voice sounds when you're listening to her. So it's
That's
so fun
so
to be
funny.
here.
That's so funny. Well, thank you. Thank you. So, okay, this is going to be I promise you guys, this is not a brag conversation, but it's just interesting that you said that because someone literally, I did a small local in-person gathering recently where we had a money brunch for women physicians. And one of the women that came posted on social media and was like, oh my goodness, I thought I knew Dr. Latifat from social media, but in person, she's just like more. So it's funny that you're like, you guys need to see. It's not a crazy kind of more, but it's just, I don't know. I like humans, and when I'm with you, I like to be with you. And so I'm definitely grateful for that. But we want to talk about you. Tell our audience, who are you and why do I think you're fabulous?
Well, I can leave the latter to you, but I can tell them who I am. So I'm Kristi Angevine, like she said. I trained as an OBGYN, did that for about 11 years in private practice with some teaching and all the things. Really, really, just really loved that world. Had no idea it'd be an OBGYN. Found it, loved it. It was amazing. Somewhere along the way, I found coaching and had the experience that, many people may relate to, where you find something, go, oh my gosh, I didn't know this existed. I feel like I'm meant to do something with this. And it kind of doesn't make sense. It might not be logical. And yet it was an unignorable sort of desire. And so I ended up living a bit of a double life, doing coaching and OBGYNing. I had a beautiful, amazingly supportive private practice here where I live in Oregon, and had a double life. And then that sort of led me to becoming a business owner and an entrepreneur and making my business of coaching people on their habits and sort of their patterns. So I live in Central Oregon, but I'm not from here. We moved around a lot as a kid, but we lived in the Southeast. So I can say y'all with the best of them because we lived in Chattanooga for a long time. I'm married to my husband, who's a retired ICU nurse, and we've got 2 kids and some cats and a dog and some things. Yeah, that's
I
that's what comes to mind right now.
I am curious, how did you find why habits?
Yeah, such a good. Okay, so the etiology of habits for me was when I first started coaching. First, I was just sort of learning how to do the craft. I had like some basic tools, some basic questions, and they worked because, it's not always the tool, but it's sometimes just the energy that you bring. And so I was coaching people on everything. But then I found myself and was really fascinated and really interested in helping, particularly physicians who are struggling with over drinking and struggling with habits. I'm doing air quotes that they found were taking more than they gave. But I didn't phrase it that way. I just knew that people were saying, I've got some maladaptive coping. And I'm too scared to take it to my psychologist, psychiatrist, colleagues, friends, because I'm nervous that if I say this out loud and there's a record of me saying, hey, I had a glass of wine last night and I worry I have a problem, or I'm spending too much and I'm shopping too much and I worry that means I've got a problem. I realized I really loved having a safe space for people who are struggling in that way. And I didn't know what it was about that I liked helping with, but I liked it. It was great. And then over time, I realized the coaching that I did specifically with physicians on alcohol, it never was about the alcohol. I mean, yeah, maybe a little bit, but like it was always about what was behind it that made the alcohol a solution for what they were trying to fix. And that's what made me realize, oh, so there's something about default patterns and things that we don't examine that just happen automatically that I think of as habits that I think are fascinating. And so for me, when I think of habits, I don't mean our morning routine and like what we do, what we do every Thursday, like we've talked about, like, or how I put my hair behind my ears or how I fidget with my earrings when I'm nervous, my habit of doing, I don't mean those things. What I mean by habits are the sort of automatic things that we think, feel, and do when we're not sort of examining them. And so habituated patterns, they can be really positive or they can be soul sucking or they can be just eh. And so I found habits in that way and I didn't know. I wasn't like, you know what, habits are fascinating. I think I'll study habit. I had no idea. But then I realized, oh, what I think of as habits, maybe a little bit unconventional, but there's just a fascinating, it just opens the door to so many fascinating things in our psyche about why, how we've been sort of indoctrinated and socialized and hand me down beliefs we've gotten from family and then the things that we continue to choose to believe and how these result in our experience of life. So that's my long answer to your short question.
I mean, you can't imagine how much I love this because we're on a money and wealth podcast. And one of the things people will say is, I am not good at this. I've never been good. I cannot be good. And sort of like that, what now becomes our identity. So I'm curious to hear what's the connection between those two things, the identity, who we think we are, and our habits. And also, if you don't mind, are we stuck in our ways? Are there parts of us that we cannot change? Or are there parts of us that are we allowed to change all parts of us?
Okay. So those are such great questions. Steve, I'll make sure that I'll try to get to the both of them. So number one, like, so the relationship between identity and habits, I think is a really fascinating one because I think it goes both ways. And I think it will serve us to sort of define what we mean by identity. And that may be a little bit difficult because I think some people think of identity as that's just who I am, who I was born as, that's just me. And I think that that's true. And I think that there's a learned component to our identity that sometimes takes over and sometimes may lead us to these limiting, statements like, oh, I'm just not good with money. I came out of the womb, didn't know anything about money, right? That actually aren't identity so much as a learned idea. So the way habits and identity intersect for me, and I'd love to hear if you have a different take on this, but the way they intersect for me is that if we're not examining who we are, like who our authentic, truest, most like just like who we really feel like we are when there's not like when we were interviewing you on my podcast and you were talking about the noise. You're saying you have to be able to quiet the noise to be able to really listen in. When we've got a bunch of noise, we don't aren't in touch with who we really are. We can have a bunch of habits, a bunch of things that we naturally do all the time. And we look out and we say, well, this is what I do. This is how I am. This is how I interact with my in-laws, with my family. This is how I actually, and based on all that, we make a conclusion about who we are that, like, see, I think I've heard you say, like, I just let my husband deal with the money stuff, like clients of yours. Like, I just let my husband deal with the money. I don't know. I let my wife deal with money. I don't know. It's not my thing. So I'm just not good at money. And we will conclude something deeply personal based on just some habituated patterns of action that's actually not true. Then I think the other way it goes is if we have a certain identity, certain things that we think of, this is me, that can in the other way affect what we do and affect how we emotionally respond. Like I'm just not a very good listener. Like if that's my identity that I'm choosing, I'm just not a very good listener. Then it's I'm not going to question some of the things I do that really prove that to be true. Just be like, well, that's just me. And I think it can be both super beneficial and also a trap when we don't recognize this intersection. And then you said, are we just stuck in our ways? Are there some like how did you rate that? Are there just some things that we like that are unchangeable versus is everything choosable? Is that how you phrased it?
Mhm. Yes, when it comes to the things we're doing.
Yeah. So my take on this, and I'll try to be as clear as I can, is that I think we have a natural predisposition for certain things. Like there's probably going to be somebody whose natural predisposition when they are in their most truest self is to be kind of like, I don't want to say, so how to put this? They're going to have a certain style of being like, you know what? I just really like to be very clear, very courageous, very direct and to the point. That's their style. And then there's going to be somebody whose natural disposition is going to be softer and maybe more collaborative and maybe more relational. And that may be some of those sort of like immovable things that are like just differences in tendencies and what people like and where they find like, ooh, my cup is full when I do this. So I think there are some of those. And I think we know when we have those because we're like, ooh, this is just me. Like I just love this. And that's just something I don't have to work on. It doesn't, whatever. And then I think there's a lot of stuff. Like I think that's a small bit. And then I think there's a lot of stuff that we think is not changeable, we think is not malleable, we think that are so deeply ingrained. We like it's just my personality, we'll call it, that are actually learned. And I think anything that we learn, if we want to, we can unlearn and relearn.
Mhm. We can unlearn and relearn. I love that. I love that. You know, it's interesting as you're talking. One, I was reminded of a conversation that I was having this morning with my kids. So I have three girls. My first one is a thinker. She's very academic in terms of like she would say, I don't want to play. I don't want to go out and play if she feels there's an opportunity to have like a cognitive conversation, right? And the second one is like looking at her like, why can't we just go play? Right? And so what I was telling them this morning is that that can be a great thing. Both of those can be a great thing, but both of those can also be negative in some shape or form. And with my oldest one, where it comes out is when she's interacting with some of her colleagues, she's very, very clear about what they're not doing wrong or incorrectly because she's looking and she's like, that should not be there. That should not be here. That should not be here. Right. Whereas the second one is can overlook those things a little bit more easier because she's going with heart. So all of their work and assignment for today was to lead with heart. That's all of everybody's job for today. And they're going to give us feedback when they come back because we want to know how did it go? What challenges did you have? But it's really because of the first kid needs that reminder on today. I don't want you to act out of your brain in that way, but lead with love. And what comes across when I have it like, so for example, she was talking with her sisters this morning said something that sounded a little harsh. And I said, remember the goal for today is to lead with love. And she repeated the stuff she said, but with love. And it was softer. It was her tone changed, the volume changed. And I said, can you hear the difference? And I actually was consciously like thinking about finances and the financial world and how that's what's missing in a lot of financial education is
Oh
the
gosh,
lack of
yes. Yeah.
love, lack of kindness. It's like spreadsheet or die, 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 right? And all that stuff. But I'm curious to hear from you what your like when you're coaching people, what are your tips? Because this is going to be helpful even for me as I'm helping my kids in the season of how do we how do we even know that it's a habit versus it's me? And what tips can be helpful so that we all can get our ish together in the best way
Yeah.
possible? Help us, Christine, help us.
Oh, it's so good. Okay. So before I before I answer that, I do just want to just point out, like, and just sort of like talk a little bit about what you just said of like giving your kids the homework of leading with love and how you notice that like your daughter, when she rephrased things, it just sounded differently. I think sometimes we, if we know, if we know we have a tendency to do something one way, but then we hear an alternative and we're like, wow, that sounds great. Like we can take that alternative, even though it didn't come naturally to us in the beginning, and we can integrate it into our own natural style. And that can create a deliberate habit that really like, I mean, I don't know how your daughter will like this. Like maybe she'll come back and be like, that was way too much work. It was horrible. I hate it. I hate leading with love. I'm guessing that's not what you're going to get back. But we can take something that doesn't come naturally to us and try it on and then on purpose make it into a habit. Like the, and I think that's like the thing right now. Like anybody listening can be like, oh, how could I be more deliberate about leading with love as a habit I take just as seriously as like, the physical habit of brushing your teeth, right? How can I do that daily? Anyway, so I love that you did that. So because that really does touch on how you can recognize how habits can can evolve and can be something we can choose. So, in terms of tips, how to tell the difference, and here, ask your question again. Make sure I'm getting this. I want to make sure I don't go left field.
So the first part of the question is how do we like make how do you create a new habit? But it's going to be hard to do that if you don't even know that it's a habit.
Yeah. So, how do you know it's a habit and not just you?
Yes, and then how to
Okay.
change it.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. All right. So, like, there's lots involved, right? This is gonna be like high level answer, but I think like sometimes the high level just gives you such a great starting point. So I love that question too. Like, how do you even know if it's a habit? Well, habits, when we evaluate, like, okay, how are things going for me? I always like to ask, like, what's working, what's not? Because if something is working great, whether it's a habit or it's just you, beautiful. Probably don't need to waste your time or energy on that. Like, if you're just naturally leading with love, if you're naturally just being tremendously compassionate, there's not an underbelly of like overextending or people pleasing or something like that. If there's something you do naturally, whether it's habit or just you, and it's fine, awesome. When it comes to something you think, I would like to change this, I think habits, the way we can discern them from just us, is that there's a certain feeling. And by feeling, like if your listeners can see me, like I'm pointing at my chest and my body, there's a certain sort of energy and feeling to when we are at home in ourselves and we feel connected, when we feel clear, when we feel playful and creative and we feel patient and calm and centered. There's a certain feel to that. And I think if something you habitually do doesn't come with that same feeling, it's probably a habit. It's
Hmm.
probably something you learned. There can be habits that you learn that feel that way, but those are going to be the ones that you don't want to change. That you're just like, this is great. This habit, like you have referenced your Thursdays. Like, is this is something I do for me? Probably feels great. That's probably one to like. But a habit, the way I think about them, they are a learned solution. So we encounter something, we develop a response that works, that helps us in some way that may be protective or adaptive, and it solves for something. So we may become really perfectionistic to avoid feeling shame from getting asked questions on rounds by somebody who doesn't care if they make us look dumb. So we develop a habit of like overreading and doing things to make sure we're perfect to do this to avoid feeling something else. And so we develop a pattern of perhaps making sure like overdoing, overreading, overanalyzing, and being very, very fearful in our detail oriented ways, thinking we're just being high achieving and like have excellence as our goal, but really it's coming out of some fear. But at some point in time, it was a great solution. It was helpful, it was useful. When that outgrows its benefit, we will start noticing there has a certain feeling to it. Like it will be detail orientation at the expense of our time. It will be fear based, like procrastination that's not actually helping us like deeply reflect in a slow, thoughtful way. It will just be, I've reread this Christmas card 75 times and I'm afraid I'm not writing the right thing and somebody's going to judge me. So I haven't done my, whatever holiday card. Right. So habits have a certain feel to them. And I think sometimes you can just be like, yeah, okay, this is learned. So I like to ask, did I learn this somewhere and did it serve a purpose in my past? Because I can look back and say, wow, like there was some people pleasing that I developed that really did serve its purpose. I moved around a lot as a kid. It was a way to either be invisible or to not be rejected. There's other people pleasing that happened in clinical practice. Oh, this is a way to avoid maybe making somebody mad and my intolerance for conflict. Okay. That was a really strategic move for the me of that day. So, did this serve some purpose in the past? Yeah. Was it a learned solution? Okay, maybe so. And then, do I want to change it? Like, no, I love it. I love that I do this habit, right? No change. But how to create a new habit? I love that you brought up like you have to identify it first. First, you just have to know, okay, this is a learned response, whether it's emotional, whether it's thought, belief that you just keep thinking and thinking and thinking, but it's just by habit. You haven't questioned it, or whether it's actual behavior, like how you interact, how you talk to yourself, how you look at your money, how you whatever. If you want to create a new one, you first have to know what's in the way, what makes it hard. Why haven't I already done the other thing? And I think that's on a place where people have to spend a lot of time. What's in the way? So people pleasing. What's in the way of stopping that habit? Well, there might be, a worry about what other people think. Okay, so I need to get into that. Where did that come from? How do I change that? How do I worry less? Should I worry less? Is it safe to worry less? Do I need internal safety? What's going to help me have the courage to be okay with other people being disappointed? So I need to know like what makes it hard? What's in the way? Once I know what's in the way, then I have to be like, okay, what am I expecting if I change this habit that I'm going to feel? Like when I have this habit in my mind that later on I've got, like I always finish my charts on time, I stop my perfectionist tendencies, I quit second doubting, I'm not beating myself up. What do I think I'm going to feel? What do I think life's going to be like? And we also want to check in to be like, because we could be fooling ourselves, being like, well, I'm going to feel eternal bliss at every moment once I stop second guessing. Well, maybe, or maybe life will be life and you will feel as you're going to feel, but you'll feel maybe more capable and sort of confident in your ability to question any defaults. So I think knowing how you want to feel when a habit's gone is important so you can understand why you want the change. And those aren't like, hey, this is how we quickly change our habit of second guessing overnight. But this is the foundation that helps you take that step towards making a change for something that's a little bit more amorphous than just like, how do I develop a habit of walking 5,000 steps a day? Right. So those are the first steps that lay a foundation for actually making a change. Making the change is its own sort of like own little dissertation, right? But those are the first things that come to mind that people need to know.
Okay, so this is so good. And I'm going to try and repeat some of this stuff I was writing down and taking notes while you were talking. So good. This is one, especially if you feel stuck in like it's harder to change, this is one that you want to definitely listen to again and write down, take the time, give yourself the gift of time to actually write down the things that's coming up for you. But you essentially said number one is habits are learned solutions or patterns that we've developed in an attempt to avoid a feeling that we have. And asking ourselves the question of, did I learn this somewhere? And did this serve a purpose? And I love that question because we are typically reasonable human beings. So the things that we're doing or not doing seem reasonable to us. And sometimes that reason served a purpose in the past, but it's a different day, different season. Now you got some wrinkles you ain't got none before. Now you got kids you ain't got before. Now you got debt you ain't got before. Like, the thoughts that helped you get to age 5 may not actually help you now that you're like a grown up adult. So understanding and being kind to that person that this habit serve this version of you can be an act of kindness, like the people pleasing, like you're talking about, the go big or go home, like whatever it is that got you to where you are, not asking for help may have helped you get good grades on the words because they were judging you if you asked questions, right? And empathy for that version of you will maybe help melt your heart a little bit and like release the grip that's holding you in the past. So I love that you said that. And when you talked about the things that how we can now start to think about changing the habit, so you said identifying it first is key, asking ourselves what's in the way, what makes it hard to change. And the number three thing you said is when I have this new habit, how is life going to feel like? How is life going to look different? And what comes to mind when you said that is the things that we're doing right now are because we have made a case for it. We've made a case. You were the judge, you were the, maybe not the judge, maybe the attorney that like built this case for why not looking at your finances was the best thing. Why not investing was the best thing. Why overspending is the best thing. Why not asking for help was the best thing, right? And so now what these questions are guiding you to do is you already know where you're trying to get to. And now to make it easier, you're building the case for yourself to make it easier to get to the outcome. Does that sound like what you did I would you give me
This,
a B minus on this
I
or
love
a
it.
C minus plus?
No, I think this falls into the category of an A where you've basically distilled down and then blended things I've said with some of your own brilliance in ways that are so practical for people. I mean, I some of the things you said just sort of enter my mind that I think would be important to emphasize, particularly to your listeners who may have a tendency to be maybe a little bit hard on themselves, because I sense that when you talk about doing things with kindness and with compassion, you haven't said this out loud, but I'm suspicious that perhaps you may have done things differently for yourself and your clients may classically do this differently for themselves. So I must say that when it comes to making any change in mindset, change in emotional responses, change in behaviors, if we do it from a place of self-loathing, there's something wrong with me that I need to fix. And once I fix it, then I'm going to be okay. And we do it harshly and like, what is my problem that I can't get my act together and look at my finances? God, like I must be so dumb. There's something wrong. When that part is what's sort of driving the show, we can absolutely make changes, but at the end of the day, we will feel beat down because we are not doing it from compassion. And compassion doesn't have to be soft and passive. Compassion can be really like, the fierce power of love. Like when we treat ourselves lovingly and kindly, we're like, yes, it makes so much sense. I developed this habit of avoiding looking at my finances, of pleasing other people, of putting myself less. Oh my goodness, makes so much sense. And no more. We're not going to do that. But not in a mean way, but just in a, hey, we're doing something different because this matters more than what we've done before. That type of kindness is critical. I see people, they make great habit changes and they do it from a place of self-loathing and self-criticism, and they still feel miserable at the end of the day. So I want to put in a big plug for not changing things with harshness and being willing to let habit change take time. I think sometimes we rush and we're just like, why hasn't it happened already? Why haven't I stopped? For my people, why haven't I stopped the second guessing and the catastrophic thinking and the rumination and the procrastination? What's my problem? I haven't like, well, you just started doing this like a couple days ago or a couple months ago, or maybe last year you started working on something that took 45 years to develop. It's okay if it takes some time. And I think sometimes when we want solutions fast to feel better, we forget that sometimes we just have to do as I've heard you say, and we just have to start doing and we have to simplify things into like tiny practical steps. What's one thing I can do today to use your example? What's one thing I could do today to lead from love, either to myself or to other people? What's one tiny thing? Not how do I radically change my entire personality so I always lead with love, right? Like it's too big. You need to make it really small.
Thank you for that breakdown. You know, someone is listening right now and they're like, okay, this sounds great, but anytime I'm trying to change my habits, it just feels so uncomfortable. What is wisdom you would like to share with that kind of question or thought process?
Yeah. First, I just want to normalize it. Yeah, that's uncomfortable, like to make a change. And it doesn't mean stop, but it does, for me, discomfort says be curious. That's my cue. I need to be curious and slow down. So if it's uncomfortable, welcome to the club. Like I can't tell you how many things that I am constantly, even though I do this work for a living, unpacking, unraveling, relearning, revisiting is not comfortable. Like I not comfortable. And that's okay. It's okay that it's not comfortable. It is normal. It's all right. So it doesn't mean anything's gone wrong, but how do we address the discomfort? So first off, we address the discomfort by saying, number one, it doesn't mean anything's gone wrong. It doesn't mean that if this is uncomfortable to make this change, that I need to stop. It just means, in my world, it means that there are some skills we haven't yet learned that may be internal skills, maybe external skills, right? It may just be like, oh, I need to learn these things to like, what's the verbiage for investment? There's a skill gap. And how can I address that skill gap in a way that's really practical for me? And that skill gap may be I need to be okay with feeling uncomfortable and not make myself wrong or bad for feeling uncomfortable. My like side note for anybody here who likes to geek out about, the psychotherapy model, internal family systems is usually discomfort is a part of us. It's a part that's calling for our attention that we can be like, huh, interesting. Like we would, like if your kid came to you uncomfortable, mom, I don't like playing with my sister. I'd rather go talk, right? And you're like, oh, that's uncomfortable. And if you were to be so compassionate and curious by like, oh, babe, like what makes that uncomfortable for you? Like, I'm so curious. Like, how come? What's coming up? Like, tell me all the things. If we can approach our own discomfort with that same curiosity of like, why am I uncomfortable? Like, I think discomfort is sometimes universal, but it's very specific to each of us. Each of us has a different version of that, right? Like, my discomfort is very different than your discomfort. We might discover they're similar, but like sometimes they're so different. And unless we're curious, we're not going to know why. How come I'm uncomfortable? I don't know. And when we can just be so loving, we will, if we listen and we listen with a very open mind, open heart to what comes up, it's almost like talking to a friend at a coffee shop where you're like, what's going on that you're so uncomfortable? And we will hear, I'm scared. I'm nervous. I mean, we'll hear something and we'll go, oh, that makes sense. Or, oh, that doesn't make sense. Let me find out more. I hope that answers your question
It
about the
does, it
discomfort.
does. I love the curiosity. I think one of the gifts, and that's why one of the gifts we can give ourselves is appropriate slowness. That does not mean being slow throughout life, but it's knowing the things that you need to. It's like when you're driving, there's some areas you need to, like, when you get to a speed bump, you should slow down, not speed up. And so these areas that we're talking about where it's uncomfortable, they are the areas where we should probably treat like a speed bump and just slow down a little bit and be curious, right? And at the end of the day, most times when we actually get curious, there is a light bulb that goes off like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I've not done
Yes.
this before. That makes sense that I'm scared, right? And it doesn't mean that we're not going to continue on. It just means that it makes sense to have a speed bump on you know, when you're driving on the whatever in the streets where there are kids and schools and all that. So, oh yeah, that makes sense. And I think that extra level of intentional slowness will help us last longer on the road of changing our patterns that will now lead to the outcomes that we're looking for.
You said that so beautifully. I love it.
You said it. So just FYI, you said it. I'm reflecting on what you're saying the same way our audience is going to reflect and they're going to go, wow, this is beautiful because now these are the nuggets. It doesn't take a lot to change and get the outcome you're looking for. Just change it. One small change that compounds.
Exactly. And I think that's a lot of the sort of the belief system that can fuel our habits. If it's, I have to do it right, I need to do it perfectly, I should know better. What's wrong with me that here's where I am? That's going to lead to a different experience and different actions than, you know what, one step at a time. I trust myself to pick one thing and learn from it, even if it's something I look back and go, that was crazy. I trust me. I can do this one small step. Slow is fast. And that mindset is so much more open. There's a certain feel to it. Like you can tell when you and I are talking about it, like we can get excited, but we can also just be like, when we're saying, like, wow, like when you're really feeling this way that allows you to do that appropriate slowness. I mean, it's almost like clouds move out of the way and things are so much more clear. You can see where you're going, or if you can't see where you're going, you're okay with it. Like I'm just clear in knowing that it's okay, I'll figure it out. And that clarity, I think, is only possible when you're deliberate about the slowness and deliberate about the curiosity and the compassion.
I mean, I could talk about this all day, and I maybe actually need to do a different podcast on like fast and slow because I think so many people have misconceptions about this. There was a post that I did on social media about urgency, and someone, people can have different thoughts, but someone had commented, and I realized that it's because people don't know what urgency is. I think there's just those belief systems that we've been taught, like urgency, people think quickly, 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 but sometimes it's like urgency to slow down, right?
Yes.
Sometimes,
Yes. There's
like,
a,
right?
yeah, I think there's like I mean, there's appropriate urgency. Like I want to move swiftly when like I really do have 5 seconds to stop a hemorrhage or to stop my car. There could be an urgent, right, and an urgency to slow down. Like, yeah, like I think the nuance of that word, like I
Yeah,
do think it perhaps I hadn't thought about it, but I could see how it could be misused
yeah.
and then misexperienced, if that's not a word.
We get it.
Yeah, totally.
Every word was made up by someone, so why not
There
you?
we go. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Oh my goodness, this has been so much fun. And I mean, number one is I just love the work you do. I love how you do it. I've told you before, I love the kindness that you bring forward, which is what a lot of money spaces are missing. And I'm so glad that I could bring you to our money world, but also because everybody that's listening right now, this podcast is about building your rich life and creating wealth from the inside out. Everything you need is just one skill set away, one habit. And if you actually ask yourself, what is that one thing I want to work on right now? What is that? Where is that pain point right now? It's not like, what's the one thing I can work on? But it's like, what is that pain point right now? And you now go ahead and use this framework that we just shared with you and actually put it into action and do the work 3 months from now, 6 months from now, just by repetition, things will change. Try it out. And when you do, send me a message and go, Latifa, you were right. Or Latifa, you were so wrong. Whatever it is, I can take it. Just send me a message on Instagram or Facebook, moneyfitmd.com. So I want to ask you, is there anything that you'd like to leave with our audience that we haven't covered yet? That you're like, Latifa, if there was one thing, if I'm like going down right, I'm like, this is one thing I want you guys to know. What's that one thing?
The one thing that we've touched on this a little bit, but I didn't explicitly say how important I think it is. I think if somebody listening doesn't have a sense of sturdy self-trust and self-love, you'll know. People listening who are like, "Yep, no, I really struggle to trust myself and really don't like myself so much, less love." If that's missing, it makes pretty much everything in life so much more difficult. So if things feel really difficult, that could be a clue that there could be a self-trust and self-love like thing to dig into. And I I just think that if that's somebody who's listening to this is struggle, I want to really normalize. It's very human. We learn lots of things that serve as barriers, for us accessing our inner wisdom and trusting that. And it's worth working on. And so that's my way of saying segue into the work that you're doing here. Like a lot of people, when they hear Money Fit MD, they think it's all about money. When you were on, Habits on Purpose podcast with me, I mean, we spent probably about 3 minutes talking about money specifically at max. The rest of it was all this other stuff that is critical to talk about when we're talking about this important thing of money. And I think the work that you do, it's just, I mean, it's so important. And I mean, it's just critical. It's beautiful. I love it. And it's been so great to follow you and see what you've done and the example that you set. So if somebody's listening and it has been your long-term listener for a long time, but hasn't taken that next step. Like, here's my plug, right? Like, Latifat didn't tell me to say this, but like, please, like, take that next step for yourself, whatever that is, whether that's like doing something and joining money school or whatever it is. But please go take another step. Leave a review of the podcast, right? Show Dr. Latifat how much you love her because it really matters. The work you're doing matters, and people taking action based on what they learned from you is really important for this world.
I received that and I just let that sink. So I want to just say thank you for the kind words. And it really does matter. And this is the stuff that's missing when it comes to money that makes it hard. It's like trying to
Yeah.
plant a seed on a hard soil. It just
Yeah.
will not work. You need to like tilt the soil. So a lot of this is making sure the soil is right because we already know the seed is good and you guys are the seed. The soil just needs a little bit of grooming. And once we do that, you'll see that tree bloom like no other. So thank you for those kind words. How can people find you if they want to work with you?
Yeah. They can, I keep it very simple. Everything is called Habits on Purpose. So, Habits on Purpose is my podcast. Habitsonpurpose.com is my website. Kristi Angevine is where I am on most social media things. Habits on Purpose will find me there. And I do individual coaching for even non-physicians who want to work on some of these deeper issues and sort of explore the psychic roots to what they do on a daily basis. And then I also work specifically in small groups with physicians. I have a Habits on Purpose for Physicians small group coaching. So all the places, Habits on Purpose, that's how you can find me. Happy to connect.
And guys, please connect. Habits will change your life, literally. I was just grilling her. I'm like, what, are you writing a book yet? Because we need a book. And when you do the book, we need the audio in your voice because your voice is amazing and fabulous. And people would listen to it like 5 billion times. But y'all go start with a podcast before she writes a book. And she's going to write the book eventually. And I've said it 3 times already today, so she will. All right, everybody. I want to say thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you guys. Your time is of value. And if you have loved this, make sure you leave a review and let us know what episode you loved because then it lets us know what you like hearing and what's of value. I love you guys. Thank you for being a part of my world and have a good rest of the day. Goodbye.